Hi, Mark Roach here. Some people come up to me very seldom, but occasionally someone does ask me, how do you go deep, Mark? How do you really get to the core of what you're looking for? Or how can I really be successful? What am I missing? How to do deep inner work? Hmm. Well, that's a good question. Well, first of all, you have to kind of set an intention. And one of those is going to be to try to uncover your motives. And that may not be necessarily in what you're saying or thinking. It may be more about what you do and about what other people might be feeding back to you to help you understand more about your behavior and some of the more hidden motives from your view that ultimately will be the kind of an unlock code into discovering your deeper, the deeper gold in you, or your maybe those places that you never thought about going that would potentially provide you a lot more satisfaction in life. So again, it's not about what you say, it's more about what you do, and also about the attention you play to what happens in your life. The circumstances that unfold in your life will be very revealing because, well, you may have heard that saying, you don't always get what you want, but you always get what you need. I think that was a John Lennon song or lyric. And that seems to be a theme that's played out for me and with some others in my life over and over again, because there is some truth to accepting that everything that you have in your life around you in the moment, like right now, is exactly what you need. And you are in the process of unfolding it, accepting it or rejecting it, modifying it. That's what life is about. So let me give you an example of how I might track something back in my life. Let's say I uncover a pattern, and I'll just play out some really delicate personal things from my life for you to use as an illustration. So let's say I get betrayed by partners in a startup. Like I go out and I do all this work and I have um, put all these plans together. I've got all these followers that, are lined up and excited about coming to work for me. And I do that. And a year later, one of these partners who is going to play a minor role decides that he wants to be in charge. And he's also rich and affluent and has a bunch of attorneys and a lot of power. And he comes in and knocks me off as the top guy. It's a shock to me. I'm hurt. I've invested a lot. My reputation is affected. There's other people that are looking at me, and it's made me, look pretty bad. And I feel very vulnerable, and I'm really angry, and I find that I'm going through a lot of feelings that, well, as I notice it, I've maybe come across some of these feelings before in my life, and I'm frustrated. So what do I do? Well, some of us could act out. They could, fight this fight. For me, I turned inward and I went and I sat on the lake and I got real quiet with myself and I meditated and I journaled and I did breath work and I allowed myself to just kind of wonder and let they call this, I think Jung called it active imagination. And I tracked kind of what my spirit or what my psyche, what my soul was trying to communicate to me. And it was, I used artwork, I drew, I also found myself reflecting back to other times in my life, and even a bunch of several Bible verses came to mind. And I'd kind of been through this theme before of inviting suffering upon myself into a Christ-like figure who was betrayed. So I kind of side as a that's I think that's a common theme that a lot of us have in life of you know working, suffering, and looking for connection with others and self pity. But in this case, I was uh, I was looking at my pattern because I didn't I didn't necessarily really believe in my heart that starting an oil company in this case, and even though I raised a bunch of money and I got a bunch of people involved with this new venture that was started, and it's still running today, 12 years later. And so obviously it worked, and some of the foundation and fundamentals were very solid. And I knew at the time that I wasn't necessarily the guy that wanted to come to that same job over and over and over again. So I had to admit to myself that maybe I'm a good starter, and I just need to do a better job of protecting my interest, because I made absolutely no money out of that. In fact, I probably lost a lot of money, because I did work for myself initially in the beginning stages of this process, and also used a lot of resources and called in a lot of favors from friends, and even family helped me engage some a little bit of legal advice up front. So I let a lot of people down in the long run, um, who were on my side, and didn't even really, they trusted me, and they weren't 100% engaged formally in any outcomes that might come from this. They were just doing this because they loved me or liked me and felt like I usually took care of people who I cared about around me. So anyway, I ended up flat on my face with nothing, and um, it took me a number of years to recover from that trauma. But as I was reflecting back on this, I remembered that whenever I was around 19, I'd been invited. I was a football star, and I'd never pursued joining a fraternity in college, but I was invited to be part of a really popular fraternity on campus, and several guys on the team were advocates for me. And what I found was, I was revolting against that. And I actually went out and I started a fight with the whole fraternity and did some things that I'm not proud of to act out on this pattern of and it was kind of a self-destructive pattern. So I didn't understand exactly how that related to what happened to me later, but I just, doing the deep inner work and letting my imagination run, it brought me back to that time, and it felt similar. Like there was something pulling me to be part of something, um, out there in the world, part of a group. Other men were involved, and it didn't seem right, and I was fighting something, but I knew that it was an internal battle. I knew that fraternity back in the day when I was 19 years old, they hadn't done anything to me, and they didn't deserve my rage or my fight, but I was projecting something upon them. Well, that was a reflection that I played with for a while, and I went back even further, and I remember being angry and afraid And when I first went away to a baseball camp, it was like my first time as an adolescent to go away from home, and I was going to be staying with a bunch of guys at a baseball camp, and I got physically sick. And I can remember the morning that my parents were going to take me to this camp about 90 miles from where I grew up. And I was a good baseball player. It wasn't about baseball or being afraid about that. It was about being afraid of being around a bunch of guys. And I was about 12 when this happened. And I got homesick that week that I was at this baseball camp. And I ended up falling apart. And I can remember my parents coming, driving that 90 miles midweek to look in on me to make sure I was okay. I was having trouble eating. I was not sleeping well. I was afraid, and I was afraid of these people, these other guys that I was bunking with at this baseball camp. Didn't understand any of those feelings at that point in time, but it was devastating to me. And there wasn't anyone to talk to about it. So here years later, I'm letting myself just kind of feel and go into that. Then I suddenly had these lights come on that I had been sexually molested by a neighbor boy around the age of 5. And the reason I remember this was my mother had walked up and discovered this and neutralized the situation. Of course, this is in around, the late 60s. So not a lot of people knew how to handle those situations or how to help a young kid, deal with those emotions and, you know, of life. It's where the rage had come from, and the rage that had potentially, that I was acting out on against all these guys that invited me to be part of their fraternity. And then also there was some self-hatred over this and some confusion that, had kept me from choosing the right paths in life. And I was not, I don't really feel even today that I was meant to run an oil company. Maybe I was smart enough and cared enough about people to connect with them and be a good leader. So there were some qualities that I knew that I was engaged with and using properly, but not necessarily in the right venue. So I kept working with that, and I knew that I needed to work around that, the time that I was molested, and that was a powerful thing to unpack in my life, and it's taken a number of years, and I did some EMDR with that, and I'm going to make a video here in a little bit how I used EMDR on these types of issues. But there was another thing that came up as I continued to examine this feeling that I had from this betrayal of partners, business partners in my life. Well, when I was a kid, a young boy around the age of 5, also around that time that I was molested, my father had encountered um, what we would call today cognitive dissonance. He scored a huge win as a detective and became a local celebrity in Southwest Missouri for busting a drug drop by the Mexican cartel into a field in Southwest Missouri. And he had his picture on the newspaper and articles written about him, and he was, up for promotions. But our family, I had I had some death threats that I felt against me. And then, in the late 60s and early 70s, a lot of the mob that was involved with bringing drugs into the United States and to the distribution network, was running all through Southwest Missouri. And there's a lot of pressure on local businesses and law enforcement to look the other way. And that caused my father the cognitive dissonance. He just didn't have the support from the whole community to champion this effort that he wanted to lead to totally eradicate the mob, the organized crime, the drug cartel from the area. And it caused him a great deal of distress. And I'm a very empathetic person, and I love my dad. And I remember looking up to him and feeling so close to him and connecting with his heart and all the motives that he had around family and the church and the community, and watching him suffer. So the point here in doing this deep work is to find these places in your psyche, in your soul, that are implanted deep in your body. And I'm not going to try to, it doesn't really matter if it's your mind, spirit, soul, body, your vibe, whatever it is. But that deep core is that has a place that everything that you do, may be stemming from, that kernel of identity or that perspective or that old wound that's still there, that's never fully been reconciled, that you're acting out of and not fully aware of. That's the place that if you can find that and begin to accept and understand, maybe not fight that anymore, then those patterns in your life that you saw defeating you, where you were doing things and suddenly either self-defeating behavior came up, or you began using substitutes rather than dealing with reality, or you find that you weren't able, or you just didn't have access to the true feelings that you had about people in your relationships. Well, that's the kind of stuff that will unpack if you do this kind of work in your life. If it's right for you. And the time will come that either circumstances will provoke that for you, or there'll be a loved one that needs that from you, that will open up some of this. Or, maybe you'll never, take that path into the deeper aspects of yourself. And then on your deathbed, you may face some of those things and then have some questions, need to reach out and do some examination. Maybe forgive some other people. Maybe make some confessions for things that you realize that you could have done differently. So that's some of the wisdom and insight that you may get from those things. And you have to remember that in this world, in this life, in the circumstances that you encounter, everyone really is trying to survive at a deep level. And not everyone has the same values as you do. And a lot of these rules that are out there are for the general social order. And you may be frustrated because the church that you go to, or the group of people that you run with that may be well-meaning and caring and sensitive and concerned about the future of the earth, or of mankind, or of their family, or the organization that they champion. but they may not have the resources to help you heal and really know the details of how to help you walk through this emotional and spiritual feeling, psychological, the complete journey that, and your body may be part of it too. Um, we trap emotions in various parts of our body. There's 1,000 ways to avoid dealing with issues that eventually, you may find are very simple and easy to deal with. But these things that we find at our depths don't have to necessarily continue to define us. You can make progress and you can use them and let them go and operate from that wisdom and insight and actually gain the full vitality of your soul and body and spirit by letting them go and trusting in this experience, in these circumstances, because there's so much power in connecting with others authentically and having these relationships. Because if you limit yourself by isolating, then that's all you've done. I'm trying to reach out to others through this video and connect and share some deep things in my life in hopes that I can connect with others through those, that there might be some value in this that would be in on the other side of this camera, where this might cause someone to reflect and do better in their life. So that's your choice. You can see or feel the pattern, track it back into your childhood, and see that there may be some more work to do. And you might want to consider some of the things that I've thrown out here to examine and track these. And then it does come around to having some specific techniques, like I use fasting and exercise, breath work, EMDR. I even use some hot and cold type therapy to ensure that my nervous system, the vagus system in particular, is relaxed and clear and open, so that I can feel the full vitality, that all of my senses are wide open to understanding what's going on inside of me and around me. I'm Mark Roach. I hope that you benefit from this, and I wish you all the best.